think it's fair to say that generally speaking, I am a rule following, screwing the nut, law abiding kind of guy. I know that makes me sound really, really boring, but that's just the way I am. However, I am acutely aware that what I'm about to go and do, and what I've been doing for some time, and what I fully intend to do in the future, isn't following the rules. It's, in some people's eyes, not screwing the nut. And whilst I think it falls short of breaking the law at the moment, I am aware that there are some bills in process to potentially make what I'm about to go and do a criminal offence, and not, as I believe it is at the moment, just a civil offence. If you're wondering what heinous criminal act I'm about to embark upon, keep watching. The astute of you have probably cottoned on by now that the rule that I am breaking is that of wild camping. And later on in this video, I'm going to give my thoughts on that and my perspective on that. But before I do so, I'm mindful that people watch these videos from all over the world. So I want to provide a little bit more context pertaining to where I am and what I am and aren't allowed to do. I'm about, in probably another half an hour's time, about to pitch up a camp, a wild camp up in the mountains of the Carnarvon region of Snowdonia in North Wales. I do not have landowners' permission to do that. It's also not a formal camping site. It's not a pay-as-you-go camping site as such. So I've not paid to be there, and I don't inherently have the landowners' permission to be there. Now, that within Wales and certainly England, I'm not sure about Northern Ireland, not so much Scotland, that's not allowed. You should not be wild camping anywhere without landowners' permission. I know that. I've known that for a very, very long time. In the past, there has been a, I think everybody that kind of does this, that knows their stuff, knows that they shouldn't be doing it. However, there's something of an unwritten agreement, a tolerance, if you like, from the landowners in the national park, that as long as you are doing it well away from the crowds, as long as you are not doing it on a track, as long as you are tidying up after yourself, leaving the place in good order, as long as you're not interfering with the farming activities, as long as you are at a decent height. I think I've read somewhere, ideally above the highest fence line or wall line in that area, although that's sometimes hard to adhere to. As long as you're doing these things, as long as you're being, dare I say, responsible, then the landowners in the national park have kind of tolerated this in the past. And until quite recently, from my perspective, until a couple of years ago, possibly dare I say even until last year, until lockdown lifted in the area, I'll come on to that, this kind of agreement has always been in place. Wild campers know they shouldn't be here. Landowners know that they shouldn't be there. The National Park Authority know that they shouldn't be there. But actually there's something of this relationship between the three whereby as long as you are screwing the nuts, not being a prat, and adhering to just being a good outdoors person, things were allowed to continue. However, that's not necessarily the case anymore. I'll tell you a little bit more once I've established camp. As you can see, I've now pitched up at Kin and Afon. Actually, it took me quite a while to find somewhere to pitch, to be honest. There's a fair old wind coming down and it's forecast to get slightly stronger throughout the night, so I've really been looking for somewhere that's going to give me a little bit of shelter from that wind without being too far from water supply over my shoulder. But I found somewhere now. It just took me a little longer than I would have really liked, but hey, that's why we do these things, right? Time is ticking on. I'm going to get in my tent, I'm going to get some hot food on. Join me in just a second in your time where I'll talk a little bit more about this whole wild camping, rule breaking rant that I've been promising you for the last few minutes. As you may be able to tell from the changing light conditions, the extra layer, and my bleary bed eyes, it's not actually a few minutes later, it's actually the next morning. Let me continue, whilst my porridge is cooking, let me continue talking to you about this this trespass, this wild camping / trespass. Let's just examine what we know so far. Landowners in the national park have tolerated it for a very long time. People like me, responsible people like me, and I'm sure like you, have been doing this for a very long time. Everything seems to have been going well and in harmony with one another. So why, what's got my back up? What's changed to make me want to record this video? Well, I personally saw, during one of the many lockdowns that were lifted here in Wales, which were broadly similar to the lockdowns that happened in England, although not quite exactly the same dates, but broadly speaking, they were roughly the same. As those lockdowns were lifting, I forget which one, there were signs starting to crop up in all sorts of places around Snowdonia National Park, all exactly the same sign, or very, very similar. And they were starting to crop up in car parks that wild campers would use to park their cars. They were starting to crop up at the start of tracks and routes that wild campers would take to get into the hills to do their wild camping thing. And those signs were essentially saying that you shouldn't be doing this. It's not right, it's not allowed, landowner's permission, so on and so forth. Everything I've kind of regaled elsewhere in this video. And of course those signs were right. Those signs were stating a truth. Whether you agree with it or not, the signs were stating a truth. But the signs had never been there for the years, the decades, much longer before. So why had they started cropping up? Why were people like me not differentiated on those signs? Because those signs simply said, no wild camping, no this, no the other, landowner's permission, so on and so forth. No, it didn't relate at all to, oh, by the way, if you're Craig Taylor or people like him that are doing it responsibly, you're okay. But if you're these sorts of people, and I'll come on to these sorts of people in a second, that's not okay. The signs covered everybody. They didn't differentiate. And I get that. I'll come on to why I actually agree with the signs. I get that. I get it. I get they can't differentiate. The other people that I'm referring to there are the people that you may have seen news reports about in your area or the areas that you like to visit. Of course, when you think about this, during lockdown, people were cooped up at home in the broadest sense. I'm not sure everybody was actually cooped up at home, very few people, but people couldn't travel as much as they possibly would like to. People couldn't go abroad on holiday. People couldn't visit the places they'd perhaps like to visit or had planned to visit. So when lockdowns lifted and people could go somewhere a little different, such as this, national park such as this, people did. Lots of people did. Tens of thousands, I suspect, maybe more people did. And that's a good thing. I'm not down on that. That's a good thing. Introducing more people to the outdoors, getting people to come and visit Snowdonia, huge injection of tourism and therefore cash and therefore livelihoods and so on and so forth. I'm not down on a huge amount of people visiting, although it did put the infrastructure under some challenges. What I'm down on were the small percentage, but still a large number of people that arrived. They pitched up with cheap, and there's nothing wrong with cheap gear, but cheap often then becomes disposable. I'll come on to that. Cheap gear, tipping up, walking a few hundred metres at best from the car parks, setting up huge campsites with lots of tents, beer bottles, wine bottles, food wrappers, nappies, human waste, all left behind, including on many occasions the camping gear itself, because they were never going to go and do that again. It hadn't cost them much. It cost them much less than going to Butlins or for a flight abroad or something like that. So kit was just left and dumped. And there were tons of reports in this area, and I'm sure in the areas that you like to visit, of people coining the term fly camping. Not wild camping, not the stuff that you and I do, but they just fly camp, dump all their shit, sometimes literally, and then just walk back to the car and go. And that, of course, landowners in the national parks and sane people like you and I, we don't like that. So I get the signs. I understand the signs. I agree with the signs. If I was a landowner, I'd probably be putting a sign up like that. If I was in charge of the national park, I'd probably be putting a sign up like that. I get it. The irony is that the majority of people that are probably doing the bad stuff they know deep down it's bad stuff. No sane, rational, logical, cognitively functioning adult thinks it's okay to go into the countryside and leave all of your crap behind. Nobody thinks that, okay? So therefore the sign is really not saying anything other than what people should morally, that, you know, the sign is just reminding people of where their moral compass should be pointing anyway. But I get the signage, I get it. If it prevents 1% of people from doing the bad thing, then good, that's a good thing. I don't think it's going to prevent the majority, because people's moral compasses should be pointing that way anyway, but they're not. I think the thing the signage does is it allows landowners and park rangers and wardens to be able to say, hey, you've walked past 2 signs to get here that say this and you're still doing it, off. So that it gives, I suppose it gives a sense of authority when people are discovered doing that. But of course, when I say people discovered doing that, I'm still doing it. I'm not dumping all my crap, but I am still wild camping, and the sign doesn't differentiate from me. So my hope is, and I'd be interested in hearing from you in the comments below if you've experienced this for good or bad. My hope is that if I were to be discovered doing the sane, calm, responsible thing that I've been doing for a long time, that you and I have been doing for a long time, the park rangers and wardens would just give us the courtesy of ignoring us, or coming over for a chat, or just reminding us that we shouldn't really be doing. However, we're doing it responsibly. Keep tucked out of the way. Let's keep tolerating. There's that word I used earlier. Let's keep tolerating people like you, Craig, and people like you watching this. I'm going on the hunt for the people that are not doing this. And to be perfectly fair, I would imagine that the sort of elevation in the area that I'm in now, no wild campers are going to be further into the park than I am. No fly campers are going to be further into the park than I am, simply because of the amount of crap that they're carrying with them. I imagine the park rangers have already filled their quota further down the track, further into the park. So I'm also really interested to hear from anybody in the comments below that relies on being outdoors wild camping for their living. So I come and do this as a hobby, as a bit of fun, as a bit of escapism. But if I was a practicing mountain leader, taking groups out into the hills, how does that work for me then? That's really, if I stick to that rule, I can't do any overnighters. What if I'm teaching mountain leaders? What if I'm an MIC, an MIA? I don't know what the current qualification is, but the instructors that teach the mountain leaders, how do they get on with it? Because they definitely have to take groups out into the hills to do the wild camping skills part of the syllabus, which is ironic because there shouldn't really be a wild camping part of the syllabus, should there? Or should there? Can everybody genuinely get landowners' permission? Does anybody genuinely know where to turn to get landowners' permission in a national park? I certainly don't. How do those people get on? Do they have some form of agreement with landowners? Do they have some form of agreement with the national park? I don't know. These are genuine questions. If you're watching this and you're in one of those positions, it'd be great to hear how you get on. Do you break the rules? Do you just go and do it because you kind of are coming out from the same position that I am? If you don't break the rules, how do you talk to your clients when you're walking into that area with them and they're passing this signage? How do you have that conversation with them about the fact that we're about to go on wild camp? Wild camping is part of this qualification syllabus, but you shouldn't be wild camping without landowners' permission. Oh, and by the way, I don't have landowners' permission to take you on there. It's a really interesting kind of standoff, I feel, between the people that do it responsibly for fun and the people that do it responsibly and teach others to do it responsibly as part of their livelihood, and the whole national park / landowners themselves. I don't have an answer other than applying some common sense and crossing my fingers and hoping that as these lockdowns, as international travels lockdown lift more and more, that those people who enjoy going abroad and doing all that kind of stuff over there, getting it out their system overseas, can carry on getting it out of their system overseas and leave this beautiful area that I found myself illegally, use the term broadly, wild camping last night, in the decent condition that I found it and in the decent condition that I'm going to leave it.